This video is about crops and bleeds and why they're necessary. I have a couple examples here that I found that are just what it looks like when you don't have the color or the image right to the edge. There needs to be, if you want it to the edge, you need to have a little extra. Otherwise, you have to have it within the page, so there's a white border, and it needs to be, quarter inch or more for it to work. It's a little tough because printing is a mechanical process. So unless you're printing on the exact same, let's say 8.5 by 11, it can shift a little bit. So you don't want it to be very close, like an eighth or even a quarter would be the minimum. A half inch probably, just to make sure that the border is even. When it's printed. It looks great on screen, but when you print, things happen. So it's best to have things bleed if they're close to the edge. And you can see here, if you want it to end up being cut down to 8.5 by 11 as your final size, you need to add an eighth of an inch all the way around. So total, it's a quarter. So you add 8.5 as your final size plus a quarter inch to get an eighth on top and bottom and left and right. And there's several ways to do that. And I also have some photos that I took. Here is when you don't have any crops or bleeds. And you can see there's kind of a white line here because I was manually cutting it, which is not that different from a mechanical cutter at a printer. And you can see there's like a little white edge that is peeking through where it wasn't perfectly on the color. And when you don't have crops, you're guessing, especially if there's white area. There was no image here, so it could be off, and you can see it kind of curved because I did not have any guidelines to cut from. So that's why we use crops and bleeds. Here's the same image as an example with crops and bleeds. So now I can put my ruler here and here and here and here, and there's extra photo and color so that I am cutting into the between color and image, and there's no white gap where I've cut. So you do need to plan for that. So if you have an image like this man and you want more of his face to show, you have to add photo on the left so that his face is shifted onto the page separate from the bleed. So the bleed is in addition to. So don't have it as, oh, I love this image as is, and then have an eighth of an inch cut off and it's maybe too close to his face, or there's an important element. So that is something to consider. So when we're talking about doing bleeds in a file, let me open this up. I have just a dummy project. And in Illustrator, let me open this up. You can see that you can add this extra red line in your file that is a guide of where the bleed is. And you can set that because, if you do a large format like a banner or a billboard or something, their bleed might be quarter inch, not eighth of an inch. So you have to be able to change that. So when you create your document, always put it in. Even if you don't use it, it doesn't matter. At least it's in there. If you forget, you can go to File, Document Setup, and you can change it here. So make sure it's 0.125, which is the equivalent of an eighth of an inch. And then that red line will pop up. So a lot of students will have the bleed in there, but not use it. This is the edge of the page as if it was going to be cut down in your final size. So you need to make sure that that is expanded to the red line so that when they cut it, they're cutting onto this black line, which is the page. So if I go to InDesign and I pick out my brochure here, it's a 4-page brochure. You can also add the red bleed line, again, as you set it up, or in Document Setup if you forget. And it's under here, bleed and slug. We don't need to worry about slug most of the time, so just 0.125 here. And the way InDesign works is you are have pages next to each other in reader spreads, just like if you had a brochure and you were looking to have the two pages next to each other. And again, you would put your bar or your color or your image along the bottom, and you would have that go out to the red line. Now, when you have, let's say, a cover and you want the whole cover to be shown, like the examples I just showed you. So close all that. Like this, where you have this full image in the background, and then you have text on top and maybe a logo or a headline or something. In Photoshop, you have to manually add that in. They don't have bleeds that you can add to a file for imagery. So if I was to create a file, I often, if it's a print project, I'll go right to print, and that way I'm setting myself up with inches, 8.5 by 11. You want to change it to CMYK color because that is how printers need that type of file. And you can see it's 8.5 by 11, but if you have a full color bleed, you need more picture. So you have to manually type that in. So it would be 8.75 to accommodate the top and bottom and the left and right, 0.25. So you have to add that in yourself. Now, when you are in the file, make sure your rulers are up, Command R, and you block out where that is. So it's an inch, half inch, quarter inch, eighth inch. So it's about here. I can zoom in too. Let me redo that closer. Half inch, quarter inch, eighth of an inch. So it should make a little square in the corner. That's how you know you're accurate. So this is 1 inch, half inch, quarter inch, eighth of an inch. That's how I do it so that I can make sure I'm keeping track of which line is which. And then you can click and drag your 0 point to that edge. Let me zoom out a little bit. And you can use the hand. I'm holding spacebar, and you can use the hand to move your pasteboard around. Now you can see that if I bring 8.5 by 11, if I bring that over. Now, of course, if your size is different than 8.5 by 11, you have, let's say it's 8 by 10.5. Then you add a quarter inch, 8.5 by 10 3/4. And then make sure that you're figuring out where those bleeds are so that your imagery will fit nicely on your page, which is here. I often will then do a 4 1/8 here is the center, and you might do 5.5 here, and you can see it's clicking in so that I have a sense of where that center is. Now, if it's a brochure cover, you probably won't need that bleed, because when you look at the InDesign file or a brochure that's 4 pages, the cover and back cover are next to each other. They're printed together, so there's no cutting between the cover and the back cover. That's just the outside of the brochure. But it's nice to have that just in case something changes, and you can just move your picture box in. So if I had that image and I had it as the full bleed, I can always just move this picture box into here where that back cover would be sitting here if I was doing a full bleed cover. And now that whole thing would be my background image, color, boxes, what have you. And then the lines here, these pink and purple ones, let me send this to back. That is your margin. So that is to make sure that you are not putting your logo or your type right on the edge. And again, because of the bleed, you may put your logo here. Well, that's going to get cut off here. So it's nice to have a kind of a open area near all edges, even inside edges, like here where you can see there's the pages are together. It's a large sheet that's folded, so this is the fold. You still want a gap. You don't want text running right up into the fold. So that's why we use a safety area or margin on a page so that everything sits nicely within the page without risk of being cut off when it's printed.